Hello, welcome to the information session for potential applicants to the competition for a project to provide educational materials in accessible formats for eligible children and students with disabilities. This competition falls under the Educational Technology, Media, and Materials for Individuals with Disabilities Program, which is a discretionary grant program managed by the Office of Special Education Programs. This information session will provide you with information about applying for this grant opportunity that was posted in the Federal Register on Wednesday, February 9th, 2022. I am Tina Diamond, a project officer at OSEP. Today, my fellow project officer, Eric Caruso, and I will provide interested applicants with information regarding this grant competition. The assistance listing number, previously called the Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance Number, or CFDA, is 84.327D. I would like to go over some caveats before we begin this webinar. First, the intent of this presentation is to provide guidance only, and the information contained in this webinar provides a general summary of the information contained in the notice inviting applications and the application package. Therefore, it is important that all prospective applicants read the entire notice, application package, and any additional relevant information. In addition, applicants are encouraged to listen to a more general webinar entitled Applying for Office of Special Education Programs Discretionary Grants for an orientation to the overall application submission process. That webinar can be found at osepideasthatwork.org, the same location that houses the link to this recording.
Please be aware of application timelines. The notice inviting applications was published in the Federal Register on February 9th, 2022. All applications are due on April 11th, 2022, no later than 11:59 and 59 seconds in the evening. Note that this is Eastern Time, and applicants should determine the corresponding time in your time zone. I will discuss the implications of a late submission later in this session. The application package will soon be available on grants.gov. It contains the most comprehensive information on how to apply. In it, you will find a Dear Applicant letter from Larry Wexler, Director of OSEP's Research to Practice Division. The package includes important information about the submission procedures using the grants.gov system. The package also contains the detailed selection criteria that will be used to judge the quality of the applications, as well as general information and all required forms. Please read the application package carefully.
In this next section, I will go over the purpose of this priority, identify the eligible applicants, and discuss funding levels for the educational materials in accessible formats for eligible children and students with disabilities competition. The purposes of the Educational Technology, Media, and Materials for Individuals with Disabilities, also known as the eTech M2 program, are to improve results for children with disabilities by 1, promoting the development, demonstration, and use of technology, 2, supporting educational activities designed to be of educational value in the classroom, 3, providing support for captioning and video description that is appropriate for use in the classroom, and 4, providing accessible educational materials known as AEM to children with disabilities in a timely manner. More specifically, the purpose of this priority is to fund a cooperative agreement to establish and operate a center that will provide free educational materials, including textbooks, in fully accessible media for eligible children and students enrolled in early intervention, preschool, elementary, and secondary schools, and eligible students enrolled in post-secondary schools.
Eligible applicants include state educational agencies, state lead agencies under Part C of IDEA, local educational agencies, including public charter schools that are considered LEAs under state law, IHEs, other public agencies, private nonprofit organizations, freely associated states and outlying areas, Indian tribes or tribal organizations, and for-profit organizations. There is one estimated award that will not exceed $8,500,000 for a single budget period of 12 months. The total project period is up to 60 months.
In this section, I'll review application information, including expected project outcomes, application narrative and selection criteria, and requirements. Once again, this webinar provides a general summary of the information contained in the notice inviting applications and the application package. Please make sure to read the entire notice, application package, and any relevant information if you intend on applying. The center has a total of 9 expected outcomes that they must achieve. I'll identify those outcomes over the next 4 slides. First, improve access to text, images, charts, graphics, equations, and other expressions, notations, or numerical content disseminated in AEM. Next, an increase in the number of children and students accessing high-quality AEM, including those in underserved communities. Next, an increase in the number of early intervention providers, LEAs, and post-secondary schools enrolling eligible children or students and accessing AEM on behalf of eligible children and students. Next, an increase in the number of eligible children and students enrolling and accessing AEM directly from the center. Also, an increase in the number of publishers and producers who create and disseminate student-ready accessible files to the center and provide eligible children and students direct access to student-ready accessible files. Next, an increase in the number and quality of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics textbooks and educational materials, including STEM images, graphics, descriptions, charts, equations, and other expressions, notations, or numerical content distributed to eligible children and students. Also, improved implementation of a model or models for producing and disseminating educational materials in accessible formats for children served under Part C of IDEA and Section 619 of IDEA, as well as expanded or enhanced models for post-secondary schools to produce and disseminate accessible educational materials and textbooks that align with the key recommendations from the Advisory Commission on Accessible Instructional Materials in Post-Secondary Education for Students with Disabilities. And finally, increased provision of educational materials in accessible formats, including any specialized software needed to use the materials at no cost to SEAs, LEAs, families, schools, for use by students who are eligible to receive accessible materials through the National Instructional Materials Access Center.
As identified in the notice, the center will engage in 6 major activities that are presented on this slide and the next one. First, the center will provide high-quality AEM to eligible children and students with disabilities, including individuals from racially and ethnically diverse backgrounds, at no cost, in a timely manner, including dedicated outreach and collaboration with stakeholders, including those in high-need communities, to increase awareness and use of AEM. Next, as a condition of this grant, the educational materials and textbooks distributed by the center must be in accessible formats that are of high quality and meet or exceed industry standards for accessibility. For example, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG 2.1 Level AA standard, or EPUB 3.2 accessibility standards, and digital rights management. Processes, strategies, and models used in the production, dissemination, and in digital rights management must be user-friendly, efficient, and cost-effective. The AEM distributed by the center must exemplify accessibility features required to receive third-party certification for accessibility. The center will improve access to text, images, charts, graphics, equations, and other expressions, notations, or numerical content included in educational materials. To facilitate continuous improvement and promote equity in access to free, high-quality products and services, the center will collect and analyze relevant data on the needs of its users and barriers encountered by children and students eligible to use but not currently using AEM. For the purposes of this priority, users includes eligible children and students, families, schools, SEAs, LEAs, post-secondary schools, and vocational rehabilitation agencies requesting AEM on behalf of eligible children or students. The notice lays out how the application narrative should be divided into 4 sections. These sections correspond to the selection criteria and include quality of project services, quality of the project evaluation, adequacy of resources and quality of project personnel, and quality of management plan. I will go over each of them and point out in general terms when the narrative should address in each section. Please read the notice carefully since the information contained in the notice is significantly more detailed. The next few slides relate to the quality of project services. The narrative should address how the applicant will, 1, acquire materials from publishers or authorized entities and make those materials accessible and available as high-quality, user-friendly AEM, including digital text, Braille-ready files, and audio formats at no cost to eligible children and students. 2, ensure equal access and treatment for eligible children and students from groups that have traditionally been underrepresented based on race, color, national origin, gender, age, or disability. To meet this requirement, the applicant must describe how it will, 1, apply knowledge of diverse populations, inclusive with regard to race, ethnicity, culture, language, and disability status, to determine preferences and respond to unmet needs of eligible children and students in selecting the materials and services made available by the center. 2, use criteria to develop and implement processes for selecting, producing, and adding high-quality products and services to meet the needs of eligible children and students. And 3, increase engagement in high-need communities to ensure educators in these communities are accessing professional development and learning to support the effective use of AEM in their instructional practice. The quality of the project services narrative should also address how the applicant will, 3, achieve its goals, objectives, and intended outcomes. To meet this requirement, the applicant must provide 1, measurable intended project outcomes, 2, a plan to implement the services and provide the products described in paragraph 1 of this section, including the provision of no-cost, compatible software for the use with a variety of electronic devices and operating systems, for example, e-readers, computers, smartphones, and tablets. 3, a plan that focuses on improving the quality, timeliness, ease of use, and access to AEM for eligible children and students, including anticipating and responding to future needs and technologies across the 5 years of the project. 4, a plan to ensure that eligible children and students will continue to be able to access at no cost the educational materials, including textbooks in accessible formats, when the center is no longer federally funded. The quality of project services narrative should also include 5, a plan to ensure the resources developed by the center are, to the maximum extent allowable under the law, openly licensed through an open licensing authority. 6, a detailed digital rights management plan that will be implemented during the project and will protect the interests of rights holders while maintaining ease of access to AEM for eligible children and students. 7, a plan to consult with publishers, software developers, other manufacturers of AEM for eligible children and students, and the NIMAC to ensure that the project uses the most efficient, cost-effective technology available to provide timely access to AEM. This plan should also address strategies to provide consistent features across all interfaces and media formats. 8, a plan to encourage and support the inclusion of accessibility features that are embedded during the development and production of AEM by publishers and producers where possible. The quality of project services narrative should also include 9, a plan for how the project will proactively coordinate across authorized entities to include IHEs, SEAs, and LEAs to reduce cost of production and duplication of materials and to improve the timeliness of distribution. 10, information on how the project will collaborate with the National Library Service, described in captioned media program, NIMAC, the National AIMS Center, and other projects supporting accessibility to ensure awareness of work, shared developed products to improve the quality of AEM, and minimize duplicative efforts. 11, information on how the project will collaborate with the National AIMS Center and other projects supporting accessibility to implement a plan for improving IHE, SEA, and LEA systems for providing educational materials in accessible formats to eligible children and students. And 12, a description of how the project will ensure the project activities are conducted in compliance with 17 U.S.C. 121. The quality of project services narrative should also include how the project will 4, provide direct support to eligible children and students to address any technical assistance needs. 5, implement outreach activities to systematically distribute information, products, and services to varied audiences, including underserved individuals and their families. For example, individuals from racially, ethnically, linguistically diverse backgrounds, and individuals living in poverty or experiencing homelessness, using a variety of engagement strategies to promote awareness and the use of the center's products and services. And 6, develop a professional learning plan to increase awareness of AEM, develop educator capacity, and create support systems for current and future educators. The plan must include strategies to engage faculty from teacher preparation programs responsible for preparing future educators, as well as outreach to and engagement with current educators to support the effective use of AEM in their instructional practices.
On this slide, we'll cover information that applicants should include in the narrative section of the application under Quality of Project Evaluation. The project evaluation must be developed in consultation with and implemented by a third-party evaluator. The evaluation plan must include the logic model by which the proposed project will achieve its intended outcomes that depicts at a minimum the goals and how they will be measured, activities, outputs, and intended outcomes of the proposed project. Must describe a formative and summative evaluation plan, including important process and outcome evaluation questions. The plan must describe how the formative evaluation will use clear performance objectives to ensure continuous improvement in the operation of the proposed project, including objective measures of progress in implementing the project and ensuring quality of products and services. This plan should be related to the proposed project's logic model required in paragraph B1 of the application and administrative requirements in this priority. The evaluation plan must describe how progress in and fidelity of implementation, as well as project outcomes, will be measured to answer the evaluation questions. It must specify the measures and associated instruments to be used so that the project can better meet the needs of current users and identify the needs of eligible non-users. Must identify and justify the sources for data appropriate to the evaluation questions. Include information regarding procedures for establishing reliability and validity of measures and data quality where appropriate. Data sources must include, at a minimum, information on the numbers of free educational materials requested by, produced for, available to, distributed to, and accessed by eligible children and students. Also, information on the characteristics of the free educational materials, for example, descriptive metadata, file types, types of literary work, source of materials, requested by, produced for, available to, distributed to, and accessed by eligible children and students, as well as information on the characteristics of the current users, for example, qualifying disability type, visual, learning, physical, individualized education program status, 504 plan status, age, grade level, member type, National Center for Education Statistics district ID or institution, who request and access the free educational materials. The plan also must describe strategies for analyzing data and how data collected as part of this plan will be used to inform and improve product development and service delivery over the course of the project, and to refine the proposed logic model and evaluation plan, including subsequent data collection. It must include cost and efficiency measures or a plan for cost and efficiency measures for the production of AEM and using information from those measures to incorporate the most efficient, cost-effective technology available to provide timely access to AEM that can be used across alternative media formats. The plan must provide a timeline for conducting the evaluation and include staff assignments for completing the plan. The timeline must indicate that the data will be available annually for the annual performance report and at the end of year 2 for the review process described under the heading 4th and 5th years of the project. Finally, the plan must dedicate sufficient funds in each budget year to cover the costs of developing or refining the evaluation plan in consultation with a third-party evaluator, as well as the costs associated with the implementation of the evaluation plan by the third-party evaluator. In the adequacy of resources and quality of project personnel section, the narrative should demonstrate how the proposed project will encourage applications for employment from persons who are members of groups that have traditionally been underrepresented based on race, color, national origin, gender, age, or disability as appropriate. The proposed key project personnel, consultants, and subcontractors have the qualifications and experience to carry out the proposed activities and achieve the project's intended outcomes. The applicant and any key partners have adequate resources to carry out the proposed activities, and how the proposed costs are reasonable in relation to the anticipated results and benefits. In the quality of the management plan section, the narrative should demonstrate how the proposed management plan will ensure that the project's intended outcomes will be achieved on time and within budget. To address this requirement, the applicant must describe clearly defined responsibilities for key project personnel, consultants, and subcontractors as applicable, and timelines and milestones for accomplishing the project tasks. The narrative should demonstrate how key project personnel and any consultants and subcontractors will be allocated and how these allocations are appropriate and adequate to achieve the project's intended outcomes. The proposed management plan will ensure that the products and services provided are of high quality, relevant, and useful to recipients, and the proposed project will benefit from a diversity of perspectives, including those of eligible children or students, families, educators, technical assistance providers, researchers, and policymakers, among others, in its development and operation. The management plan should also demonstrate how the proposed project will establish and maintain an advisory committee consisting of representatives from an SCA and an LEA, representatives from community colleges and four-year IHEs, representatives from vocational rehabilitation agencies, eligible children and students, and/or parents or family members of eligible children or students, and representatives of schools or other institutions where AEM are used. The purpose of this advisory committee is to provide the project with input and ongoing advice on the project's goals, objectives, products, and services. The project must submit the proposed membership of the advisory committee to the Office of Special Education Programs for approval within 8 weeks after receipt of the award. The project will communicate and collaborate on an ongoing basis with OSEP-funded projects. See OSEP Ideas That Work, Find a Center, or Grant Find a Center, including NIMUS-related projects. Activities could include jointly developing products, training sessions, and materials, and improving the AEM delivery system to ensure timely and easy access. And the project will maintain ongoing communication with the OSEP project officer through phone conferences, email communication, and face-to-face meetings as appropriate. As part of the process of making funding recommendations, external reviewers will judge and score the quality of the application using selection criteria for each section of the narrative. Each application can receive up to a total of 100 points. With the quality of project services and quality of project evaluation sections earning up to 30 points, and adequacy of resources and quality of project personnel and quality of management plan sections earning up to 20 points each. The application package contains information on the sub-criteria within each selection criteria, and applicants are strongly encouraged to read these carefully when preparing the application narrative. In addition to the narrative, there are application requirements. Appendix A should contain, first, a personnel loading charts and timelines as applicable to illustrate the management plan described in the narrative. Second, use as conceptual framework and provide a copy in Appendix A to develop project plans and activities describing any underlying concepts, assumptions, expectations, beliefs, or theories, as well as the presumed relationships or linkages among these variables, and any empirical support for this framework. Note, there are websites linked within the notice that provide more information on logic models and conceptual frameworks. Appendix A should also include in the budget funds to support attendance at meetings sponsored by the Department of Education as specified in the notice at a minimum. This includes a kickoff meeting, an annual project directors conference, and other meetings identified in the notice. The application must also include an assurance to assist OSEP with the transfer of pertinent resources and products and to maintain the continuity of services to eligible children and students during the transition to this new award period and at the end of this award period as appropriate. The project must also, in the budget, include a line item for an annual set aside of 5% of the grant amount to support emerging needs that are consistent with the proposed project's intended outcomes, as those needs are identified in consultation with and approved by the OSEP project officer. With approval from the OSEP project officer, the project must reallocate any remaining funds from this annual set aside no later than the end of the third quarter of each budget period. The project must also maintain a high-quality website with an easy-to-navigate design that meets or exceeds government or industry-recognized standards for accessibility, and ensure that annual project progress toward meeting project goals is posted on the project website.
In this next section, we will cover some general information related to submitting an application. Once again, please refer to the notice for additional information. Please note that applications must be submitted electronically in the grants.gov system. See grants.gov submission procedures and tips for applicants included in the application package. We strongly recommend that you do not wait until the last day to submit your application. Grants.gov will put a date and timestamp on your application and then process it after it is fully uploaded. The time it takes to upload an application will vary depending on a number of factors, including the size of the application and the speed of your internet connection, and the time it takes grants.gov to process the application will vary as well. If grants.gov rejects your application, you will need to resubmit successfully to grants.gov before 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on the deadline date. If there are reasons why an applicant cannot submit using grants.gov, the applicant must follow the information contained in the application package. Applications cannot be submitted by email, and they must be submitted prior to the deadline of 11:59 p.m. on April 11th. We strongly encourage applicants to submit all narratives and attachments in PDF, read-only, non-modifiable format. In order to make sure that the application is submitted on time and correctly, please register as early as possible in grants.gov and start the application process. Do not wait until you have the application ready to register. Grants.gov will create a workplace for applicants to submit the pieces of the application over time. If you're already registered in the system for award management, make sure your registration is current. Submit early, a day or more in advance if possible. Should there be any problems with the grants.gov system, submitting early will allow you time to correct the problem and resubmit before the deadline. Verify that the submission is okay. Grants.gov will send applicants notification that the submission was on time and validated. So applicants should make sure that they receive that confirmation and not assume the submission was okay.
Here are some additional tips for submitting an application. Pay attention to the maximum funding levels for the grant, as contained in the notice. Awards will not be made for amounts higher than the published amounts. Following the recommended organization, page limits, spacing, and font sizes to facilitate the application review process, and applicants should strongly consider following the recommendations. PDF files make it easier for the system to put together different parts of the application into one application that reviewers can more easily read and follow. The grants.gov submission procedures and tips for applicants in the application package can be extremely helpful for submitting the application in grants.gov. Please note that if for any reason an application is submitted more than once and validated more than once, the last application submitted will be considered and previous applications will be considered duplicates and therefore ineligible. There are two additional reasons why an application may not be eligible. First, all applications received after the published deadline will not be eligible for funding. Second, applications that do not address the priority will also not be eligible for funding. For example, an application proposing to build a school, purchase equipment for a classroom, establish an after-school program, or provide tutoring services for children with disabilities will not be eligible since that is not the purpose of this priority. Once again, the purpose of this priority is to establish and operate a center that will provide free educational materials, including textbooks, in fully accessible media for eligible children and students with disabilities enrolled in early intervention, preschool, elementary, and secondary schools, and eligible students enrolled in post-secondary schools. As I mentioned at the beginning, this webinar covers highlights of what's contained in the application package and priority. If you have additional questions, please contact me by email at christina.diamond@ed.gov, which is the preferred approach. You can also contact me by phone at 202-245-6723. Thank you for participating in today's presentation.